Snow impacts the local business community. The Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce is paying attention to substance abuse issues. And snow and ice translate into potential big bills for the town of Barnstable. These stories and more on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Wednesday, February 4th, 2015. I'm Sarah Mannel. The most recent snowstorms have had an effect on local business profits. CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, Wendy Northcross, says when people stay home because of inclement weather, it's bound to have an impact.
In some ways, we've been very fortunate because we haven't had big power outages, but, it's just been tough to navigate, and there's been a lot of, restaurants especially that's had a challenge getting their customers in the door. Retail's been challenged as well with having enough parking spaces, and it's to be expected. It's New England in the winter, but yeah, it's a mixed bag. I do know some of the landscapers kind of pray for snow this time of year because it's a great supplement to their business plan to get all those snow contracts. But even those poor guys are having a hard time because their equipment in some cases just wasn't big enough.
Northcross says that while many businesses may be slow during snow events like the one we had last week, New Englanders are quick to get out and moving once the weather improves. A new Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce committee will begin to discuss how business owners can help deal with the opiate crisis. Northcross says an addiction can affect business owners in many ways, and the chamber wanted to get that conversation started.
This was really something that was driven at a board meeting of the chamber a couple of months ago. There's been a lot of attention being paid, through the media, especially to the issue of opiate abuse on the Cape. But also there's a lot of groups forming. There's a lot of citizen interest in action. And our employers have been telling us that they've been having some challenges with hiring people that have the skills that they need, and yet they find that they have huge addiction issues. And so we have a strong economy this last year, and that presents challenges in terms of trying to find enough people because employment is getting better. So what we've looked at is, maybe there's a role for the chamber, not to duplicate anything that's already being looked at out there in the community, but maybe the chamber can find some way to assist employers through programs, education. Maybe we can find an aggregate insurance program that would allow employers to purchase a reasonably cost employee assistance plan that directly brings benefits back to their workforce. There's a whole bunch of ideas that we have, but maybe someone's already addressing those. So we've really established a task force to kind of assess the landscape, see what role we can play, even if it's just to advocate at the public policy level for adequate law enforcement resources or addiction, treatment resources, whatever is out there that needs an extra, hey, let's do this, push behind it. So we're in the early stages of doing that. We've formed a committee from members of the board of the chamber, but we've have added some subject matter experts.
While the committee's first meeting was snowed out, Northcross hopes to reschedule the next meeting soon. To learn more about the committee, you can contact the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. While DPW crews continue to work to clear ice and snow around town, the Finance Department will be crunching numbers. Barnstable This Morning host Sarah Colvin chatted with Finance Director Mark Milne about the town's snow and ice removal budget. We'll share a portion of that interview with you now.
Let's talk a little bit about, how the snow and ice budget is funded, and perhaps if we have some early estimates on what this storm is going to cost.
Sure. As far as how it's budgeted, it really doesn't matter how much we budget for snow and ice because it's not going to control what we spend to remove snow and ice from our roadways. Mother Nature will determine that. And as far as our response time and how we want to respond to snow and ice events will really determine how much we're going to spend. And so regardless of what you budget for snow and ice, it's the one area of the municipal budget where the state allows municipalities to spend more than what's budgeted for that reason, because it's so unpredictable. And so we budget right now about $600,000 a year, and if we spend more than that, then what we do is we add the additional amount that we spend to next year's budget. And so it's really the way this is managed is that when you're developing your new fiscal year's budget, you're adding to the new fiscal year's budget whatever you spent on snow and ice from the previous fiscal year.
Now,
so it's always 1 year behind.
Indeed, and that makes a lot of sense because Mother Nature, of course, is unpredictable, and we could have one of those years where we don't have a lot of snow, and then one of those years where we have a storm after storm, or a year like this year where we have one really big storm. Now, in the case of a storm of this nature, is there any chance, or is there any kind of provisions that we can get funding either from the state or from the feds to help kind of reimburse us for that? Does that ever come into play when we're dealing with snow and ice?
It does. There are opportunities there if the state has filed, I believe, for assistance declaring, this is an emergency event, and so there could be some FEMA or MEMA money available for this event, but we don't know if that's the case yet. But we are, every department is tracking the costs associated with the cleanup of this particular storm, and in case funding does become available for communities throughout the state. I mean, this has affected a great deal of the state, mostly in the eastern side of the state. But so I would imagine there'll be, if funding does become available, there's a lot of the communities that were impacted by this. So there's a good chance that we could see something. So we're tracking our costs associated with the cleanup so that if the opportunity does present itself, we'll apply for some of that funding to help reduce the amount that we need to add to next year's budget.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about those costs. Obviously, so much goes into it, whether it be paying for the salt and sand, the labor involved, the maintenance of the vehicles, the fuel, and I'm sure that there was an enormous amount of fuel and man hours used during that time. So do we have some early estimates on cost for cleanup of after this storm?
It's too early to tell. I mean, we haven't paid any bills associated with the cost of the cleanup yet. Today will be the first time that we see any overtime processed through our payroll system for any overtime incurred last week associated with the cleanup. But as far as the contractor payments associated with this, we'll probably start seeing those next week. So it's early. It's too early from our side of the table over here in finance to see what we've spent on this storm. DPW may not have even been invoiced yet by the contractors, but they probably have a better idea of how much they're spending. But based on my experience, a storm of this magnitude, and we had a similar one about 10 years ago. I would estimate that we're going to see costs exceed $1 million for this one storm. And
Finance Director Mark Milne is a regular guest on Barnstable This Morning. He appears on the show every Wednesday. Well, do you run at the Barnstable High School track or play on the tennis courts? Your ability to do so could change soon. Tonight, the school committee will consider a measure to limit the hours the public can access the track, athletic fields, and tennis courts. Proposed restrictions would be in place on weekdays only when school is in session. The track and stadium would be closed to the public from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The tennis courts from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The school committee meets tonight at 7 in the Town Hall hearing room. The Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission also meets tonight. They will meet at 6:30 in the Selectmen's Conference Room. Well, be sure to tune in to our hour-long news program, Barnstable This Morning, weekdays at 7 a.m. On tomorrow's show, we will get details about this week's Town Council meeting from Town Council President Jessica Rapp-Grassetti. We'll hear from the Cape Cod Commission's Technical Services Director Glenn Cannon about some possible spring road projects. Plus, we'll have all the news and information you need. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mantle.